Greetings, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are. The coffee crew has now got their own slide in the beginning of every video, instead of mentioning it here in the intro. But if you enjoy what you are hearing, down in the description box below, feel free to buy me a coffee as it helps me and the channel out. Tonight is going to be a little bit different, as I could not make up my mind what to narrate for you all. So I decided to go with a mashup. There will be all kinds of stories, creepy encounters, missing 411, stalker stories, let's not meet, etc. Some will be true and some will not be true. I will mention the genre of which I'm reading, that way you will know. Also, I always have to explain my ad placement in the videos. I will mention the intro, there will be an ad, read the first story, an ad, and no more ads for the rest of the video. Now, it is time to go back to ashes. For when we return to the ashes, we arise a bigger, better, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and enjoy this dose of vocal melatonin entitled, One Scary Mashup. Scary stories. It was a dark and stormy night. Emma was home alone, curled up on the couch with a good book. The rain was pounding against the windows, the window howling through the trees outside. It was the perfect night for a horror story. But as Emma read, she began to feel uneasy. It was as if someone was watching her. Someone lurking in the shadows just out of sight. She tried to shake off the feeling, telling herself it was just her imagination. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger by the minute. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Emma jumped, startled by the sound. She hesitated for a moment before getting up to answer it, wondering who could be out in such terrible weather. As she approached the door, she could see a figure standing outside. It was a man, tall and thin, with a hat pulled low over his eyes. Emma couldn't see his face, but she could sense his malevolence. The man introduced himself as Mr. Johnson, said he was looking for shelter from the storm. Emma hesitated, but something about the man's voice made her feel uneasy. Despite her reservations, Emma let the man in. He seemed harmless enough, but as the night wore on, Emma began to realize that there was something off about him. He talked in hushed whispers, as if he were hiding something. He kept glancing around the room, as if he were searching for something. And every time Emma tried to leave the room, he would block her way, insisting that she stay with him. As the hours ticked by, Emma became increasingly unnerved. She wanted to kick the man out, but she was afraid of what he might do if she tried. Finally, when the storm began to die down, Emma summoned the courage to confront him. She demanded that he leave, but the man refused. "I can't leave," he said. "I need to stay here with you." Emma was taken aback. "Why? What do you want from me?" The man smiled, a chilling smile that made Emma's blood run cold. "You'll see," he said. And with that, he lunged at her. Emma tried to fight back, but the man was too strong. He overpowered her, tying her to a chair and sealing the windows shut. Emma was trapped, alone with the man. As the days turned into weeks, Emma began to lose track of time. The man never left her side, never spoke to her except to utter threats and taunts. Emma was alone with no hope of escape. But then, one day, the man did something unexpected. He let Emma go. Emma didn't know why, but she didn't question it. She fled from the house, running as fast as she could, until she finally found help. The police arrived at the house, but the man was gone. He had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only a few pieces of evidence. But Emma knew better. She knew that the man was still out there, still lurking in the shadows, waiting for his next victim. As she looked out into the darkness, she knew that she was never truly safe. The visitor had left his mark, and Emma would never be the same. The police searched for the man for months, but they found no trace of him. Emma tried to move on with her life, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he was still out there, watching her. Years passed and Emma grew old. She had a family of her own now, but she never forgot about the man who had terrorized her all those years ago. And then, one day, she received a package in the mail. Inside was a single piece of paper with a message scrawled in messy handwriting. "I'm still here," it read, "and I'm coming for you." Emma's heart raced as she read the message. She knew that the man had finally found her after all these years. But she had no idea what he wanted from her or what he was planning. She tried to call the police, but her phone was dead. She tried to run, but her legs couldn't move. And then, as she stood frozen in fear, the door to her house creaked open. Emma turned to face the darkness, her heart pounding in her chest. And then, everything went black. Paranormal. This story is for the believers, or almost believers, or the curious. Not for the skeptics who think everyone is lying. I already argued with skeptics too many times. They are just as bad as religious fanatics, except worse, 'cause they throw in childish insults to try and ridicule you, thinking that actually makes their argument better or something. It's pointless to argue with them. I made a separate story about the great tragedy of liars, and I'm not talking about us, the believers. It just makes me wonder about them. I have had many things happen to me. I have seen a full-body shadow apparition, which turned out to be the so-called Hat Man, which I discovered by accident in another investigation. I have seen objects move, sometimes two objects at the same time that are 10 feet apart. I have had my locked door open and close on its own, which requires another story to explain. There's a lot of details to it. I have captured over a dozen Class A EVPs, some of which are the clearest you'll ever hear. I have recorded an EVP of a person who told me his full name to find out he wasn't even dead yet, but died 2 days later. After the EVP, which proves we do have a soul that can travel out of our body. I have recorded spirit box sessions, and I understand the doubt in this, but it works. I have two of them that there are no denying that it answered directly. I have had things thrown at me, been laughed at sarcastically by a disembodied voice. I will post separate stories about all these experiences later on. None of these things scared me. I even would say it out loud to the spirits that they don't scare me. But one thing that did scare me scared the ever-living crap out of me and will scare even a Navy SEAL in SEAL Team 6. I woke up out of a trance in front of my stove with the burner on and a knife with a plastic handle in the frying pan, the handle melting. I had no idea what happened. My girlfriend told me I called her and wasn't making sense. I had pieces of food in the freezer with knife slashes all over them. And the craziest thing of all, had a room air cleaner balancing perfectly upside down in the bedroom, which is impossible to do. I tried it over a dozen times trying to stand it upside down, but it doesn't have the top surface where it is possible. I had no control of myself for over half an hour. I started thinking about how some murderers said they'd black out when savagely stabbing someone, or how someone who everyone thought was completely normal just lost it and committed mass murders for no reason. Now I wonder if they are speaking the truth, and if true evil does exist. I got possessed. What if my mother or someone else I love was there in the house with me that day? What would I have done? I think the spirits were trying to tell me that I should be scared. True crime. Back in 2001, Linda Louisa was an 18-year-old woman that, like many other young people in Venezuela, moved to Caracas, the country's capital, to study. She disappeared for a total of 114 days and was found by the Chacao police from an apartment in that part of the city. When her sister, Ana Celicia, tried to report Linda missing, the police dismissed her and said Linda had gone with her boyfriend, and therefore she just needed to wait. And even when multiple other attempts were made to report her missing, not even one report was taken by police. Louisa's case is a prime example of how Venezuela's law enforcement fails to protect victims of gendered and domestic violence. Luis Correa Almunia, the perpetrator, had multiple complaints presented against him by at least 10 other victims. By the time she managed to escape on July 19, 2001, Linda Louisa presented multiple injuries ranging from a tore bottom lip, injuries to her ear canal due to the constant beating she was subjected to, internal bleeding, multiple traumatic brain injuries, a broken jaw and nose, restraint marks on her wrists, legs, and arms. She was also malnourished. It is important to understand that Venezuela's government plays a role in this case. Linda Louisa wasn't just a victim of the man that abducted, sexually assaulted, and almost killed her. She was victimized by the Venezuelan justice system and the government too. The authorities knew who was the culprit. It took them 53 days to arrest him, and when they did, he was sent into house arrest. The case went through 97 judges, 16 state attorneys, and the jury candidates were threatened. The trial was only concluded after a 13-day hunger strike. At trial, the state's attorney accused the victim of being promiscuous and Colombian. Louisa was forced by the same attorney to sign an affidavit at gunpoint. The worst of her injuries was not exposed at trial, and pictures that showed her alongside Almonia were never shown at trial. Basically, common sense tests like using luminol were never performed in the crime scene. The state never made an effort to prove that her injuries were the result of the repeated sexual and physical assaults she was a victim of for almost 4 months. In November of 2018, the Inter-American Court on Human Rights ruled in favor of Louisa, condemning the multiple violations of her human rights that the Venezuelan state had occurred during the investigation and trial phase in her case. Linda Louisa, today an attorney herself, while praising the efforts of the IACHR, recognizes that an international ruling is useless if the Venezuelan government, today made off of the same group of people than 22 years ago, refuses to even acknowledge its existence. Luis Antonio Correa Almonia was acquitted of all charges in 2004. The sentence was changed in 2006, and he was sent to prison for 6 years for several felonies except sexual assault. In 2008, it was decided that he had completed his sentence, and his whereabouts are unknown since then. It is important to mention that Luis Correa Almonia is the son of Luis Correa de Mas, a prominent writer, and at the time that Linda Louisa was abducted, the head dean of an important public university in Venezuela. Creepy encounters. Before I actually start, I also want to apologize for my grammar. I'm a fellow Scandinavian. Keep in mind that me and my friend that I'm mentioning in this story were only 12 years old when this event occurred, and this was our first time something like this had ever happened to us. We were terrified and still terrified to this day. So, this whole story begins when I was around 12. I'm 18 now. And it takes place at a 2-story shopping center that is wall to wall with our local IKEA. Me and my friend had been walking around for a couple of hours, buying a few things and looked around in stores. We were tired and decided to take a break and sit down for a bit. We sat down by the entrance on these 2 soft chairs, with my friend sitting to my right. Behind me to my left was a bench. On this bench, there was an old man just sitting there. He looked like he was maybe in his later 50s, early 60s, and at first, I didn't think much of it, just thinking that he had to rest his legs, just like me and my friend had to. So I gave him a smile to be polite and didn't think much of it. I continued talking to my friend, who, like I mentioned before, sat to my right. Suddenly, I got this feeling like someone is watching me. I then turned around to see that the old man was staring at me with a large smile on his face. I got uncomfortable, and just as I am about to turn to my friend and tell them that I want to leave, My stomach drops as the older man pointed at me, then slapped his lap, trying to symbolize that he wants me to sit on his lap. I observed his movements and looked up to meet his face. He was now doing a certain movement with his tongue. I froze and my survival instincts kicked in and told me to run and find a security guard. I turned to my friend and said that there was a pedophile and that we had to run. My friend turned to the old man and saw him doing that movement with his tongue towards me again. I saw how panic-struck my friend was, and we stood up and started to run through the crowd of other shoppers, deeper into the shopping center. I turned my head back to see that the man was still observing us and was still doing that movement with his disgusting tongue. I shouted at my friend to run into a jewelry store in front of us. We tried to calm ourselves down, and by doing so, I told the female cashier that her hair was really pretty. We continued to run to the upper floor to look for a security guard that could help us, but we couldn't find anyone. So, we decided to walk over back to the entrance. We were still on the upper floor, so we could have high ground on the older man if he was still sitting on the bench, and run to my grandparents' apartment that is relatively close to the shopping center. We looked over the railing to see if the man was still sitting on the bench, but he was gone. We had lost him. I was still standing in fear that we no longer knew where he was. My friend had then turned around and seen him walking towards us further upstairs. She told me, and we ran down the stairs and out of the entrance. We didn't stop until we arrived at my grandparents' place. When inside, we told my grandparents what happened, and to this day, I still fear what could have happened to us if the older man had caught up to us. I apologize if any of that story did not make any sense. I tried to describe it as best as I could. My advice, please be careful out there, and if you have children, please make sure that they have a guardian with them at all times. You never know who could be lurking around the corner. Missing 411. 7 missing in El País National Monument in the past 20 years. I asked Google Bard to pull up a list of all the people who have gone missing in El País National Monument. I asked Bard this because I had an experience there, where I almost went missing in a cave because my friends and I got separated in the bottom of this enormous, miles-long cave system. Big skylight. Then I heard music and had this overwhelming urge to follow it. I ended up crawling like a maniac worm down a tiny 1x2 or less opening. And I am not small. I went about 50 feet, following this music, before I snapped out of it. It was so tight, I couldn't use my arms, and I had to slowly pull myself back, using my heels, a few inches at a time. I or friends have had other very creepy things happen here. It's also a naturally very dangerous area. Lots of magnetism, so batteries, electronics, and compasses are not reliable. Airplanes aren't allowed to fly over El País. There are no trails because the ground is very hard basalt lava flows. The rocks ruin shoes very fast, and you cannot bring dogs. You follow cairns to get around. The cairns are made of black rocks, and they are over 100 feet apart, and you cannot rely on them for night navigation. I only have been comfortable going there at night because I can navigate by the constellations. It's actually the only way to get around at night there. This is what I asked Google Bard. Can you list all the people who have gone missing in El País National Monument? Check the history as far back as you can go. This is the reply. Sure, here is a list of people who have gone missing in El País National Monument. James Chapman and Crystal Tuggle, 2002. Kevin Kaufman, 2006. James S. Miller, 2008. Christopher L. Moss, 2011. Michael R. Smith, 2012. John F. Smith, 2012. The first people on the list, James Chapman and Crystal Tuggle, went missing in 2002. They were on a day hike in the monument when they disappeared. Their remains were found in 2010. The next person on the list, Kevin Kaufman, went missing in 2006. He was on a solo hike in the monument when he disappeared. His remains have never been found. The next 4 people on the list, James S. Miller, Christopher L. Moss, Michael R. Smith, and John F. Smith, went missing in 2008, 2011, 2012, and 2012, respectively. They were all on solo hikes in the monument when they disappeared. Sadly, their remains have also never been found. It is important to note that not all people who go missing in El País National Monument are never found. Some people are found alive and well, and some people are found deceased. However, the majority of people who go missing in the monument are never found. There are a number of reasons why people go missing in El País National Monument. Some people get lost, some people get injured, and some people get into accidents. However, there is also a possibility that some people who go missing in the monument may have been foully met. The disappearances of James Chapman and Crystal Tuggle, and the disappearances of Kevin Kaufman, James S. Miller, Christopher L. Moss, Michael R. Smith, and John F. Smith are all unsolved cases. The National Park Service is still investigating these cases, and they are asking for the public's help in solving them. Do not solo hike in El País National Monument. Glitch in the Matrix. Missing jersey. Here's a strange experience. My son is on 2 basketball teams this season, a little league and rec team and a travel team. Husband was folding some laundry in our back room. Said he had my son's baseball jersey for an upcoming weekend of travel games. I go into the room to retrieve the jersey and realize it's his rec team jersey, blue and white, and not his travel team jersey, which is bright green. And then remember that the green one is hanging in his closet, as it has been. The first thing I see every time I step into his room and pass by his closet. I've been seeing this jersey untouched for weeks. It's the first one hanging in front of a handful of other older jerseys. You can't miss it. I take the blue and white jersey from my husband's hand and go to hang it in my son's closet. to swap it out with a green travel jersey that I know is hanging there. I walk in and am baffled. It's not there. I hang the blue and white jersey up, so now it's the first thing you see as you walk into the room and pass by the closet, and rifle through the 6 to 8 other jerseys on the rack to make sure the green one didn't get hung between the others. It was just simply not there. I look through the few items on top of the dresser and just below it. It's not there either. I'm starting to get pissed. Where the heck did it go? My son hasn't even worn or needed this jersey yet, and so there was no reason for it to not be on the rack. I looked through all of his drawers and every other conceivable place it might be. Nothing. After hearing me start to get progressively more stressed about not finding it, and as I've now gone through the rack several times, my husband enters the room, and he too rifles through the handful of jerseys hanging on the rack, to no avail. My husband stands back, a foot or two from the closet, just kind of looks at me as he ponders where it could have gone, and I literally am in the middle of saying, "It feels like it just disappeared," when we both suddenly look back, and the freaking bright green jersey is now, all of a sudden, sitting right there in front of us, on the gosh darn rack, and directly in front of the blue and white jersey. Nothing else in front of it, like it had been hanging there all along. Now, I'm a total believer in things like a glitch in the matrix, but my husband leans in a much more rational direction. He admits he has absolutely no rational explanation for what the heck happened in this situation. We literally were staring at a rack with the blue and white jersey in the front, looked away for only a moment, and when we looked back, the green jersey appeared in its place. Let's not meet. I was stalked by a guest in my student accommodation. I'm 19 years old and living far from home in a studio room. I'm often up late, and last week I was just doing some laundry at around 11 p.m.-ish. I saw a man sitting in the lobby. I saw him around a bit at night, but I didn't think much of it. I'm in the laundry room. I just put my clothes in the dryer, and I hear the laundry room door beeping. It meant someone was coming in. There was the man, standing there with no clothes to wash, just staring at me. I maneuvered around him and headed to the lifts. He followed me quickly and cornered me and asked me for my Snapchat. I was tired and just wanted to get back to my room, so I stupidly gave it to him. I figured he'd message and try to flirt. I'd say, "I have a boyfriend. Sorry if you thought this was anything else." And that would be the end of it. Anyway, he sure does start messaging me. It's kind of normal. Then he starts saying weird stuff like, "I saw you a month ago and I was impressed. I've been visiting a friend and staying here. And I've been watching you. I noticed that you come out mostly at night." He told me that he was only visiting for 5 more days. Then it gets worse. He says, "I love you. I can't help it." And then I say I have a boyfriend. He says, "I only want you." and continues to completely ignore that. He asks to come to my room, and I said no. Then he wanted a hug. He asked me if I live alone and if I was a virgin. He kept saying he loved me and that I was perfect for him, that I somehow impressed him. At that point, I recorded all the messages on Snapchat, spoke to him a little bit more to gather evidence so that I could take it to reception in the morning. He's been watching me for a month. I got my guy friend who lives on the second floor to walk me down to the laundry room. We sat in the student lounge area and my friend calmed me down. I was shaking with adrenaline and fear. We saw him around the laundry room again, looking for me, but luckily I'd already picked up my laundry. I run back to my room, and my friend says that I can stay in his room, but I said it's okay, I'll just lock my door. It's about 1 a.m., and I hear someone outside my room trying to get in. I asked my friend if he's outside my room, and he said no. I instantly froze. I didn't want to make a sound. I felt sick to my stomach and helpless. Eventually, it stopped, and whoever it was went away. In the morning, I reported this to reception, and then went to stay a few days with my boyfriend. Then, after, went to London to visit a friend. And last night was the first time I'd spent a night in my room since this happened. I'm very paranoid now. Sadly, I should probably be used to this. It's not the first time I've been sexually harassed. One guy tried to kiss me in a club by grabbing my head, and a bunch of other things have happened that I won't go into in this story. Anyway, I'm terrified to go outside now. I'm terrified to go outside of my room after dark. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder and always feel paranoid. To the strange guy, let's not meet. Stalker stories. This is going to be long, so I apologize in advance, but it was creepy as hell. I was at a local grocery store I visit weekly to shop for food. I normally spend $100 to $200 a week on food for myself and my family, so I always leave with a full cart. I'm standing in the checkout line, minding my business, when a tall man, I'd guess early 40s, approached me and complimented my hair. "Your hair is gorgeous." Loud enough for everyone within a 20-foot radius to hear. Now, I appreciate a compliment as much as the next girl, but it was a little obnoxious to say the least. I thanked him politely and redirected my attention to my cart, where I awkwardly started organizing the items in hopes that the 15 pairs of eyes now staring in my direction would look elsewhere. Unfortunately, Loudmouth didn't take the hint. He started asking rapid-fire questions and statements, barely pausing for me to get a word in edgewise before the next sentence would spill out of his mouth. This is when it gets really awkward, as if it wasn't weird enough already. He asks if I want to go out with him sometime, maybe tonight, after I put my groceries away, he could come to my house and help me put groceries away, and then we could leave from there. I told him I didn't think my husband would appreciate that, and he got angry. I was freaked out at this point, and everyone was still staring. After I rejected his offer, his mood changed so fast, it was like a light switch got flipped, and the compliments turned into nasty insults and curses. Mind you, this guy didn't have a cart or anything in his hand to buy. He was kind of standing off to the side, kind of leaning on one of the drink refrigerator displays. Thankfully, a gentleman who was in an aisle within my sight, who presumably heard the whole thing, came up behind us and asked him if he was in line. Loudmouth said no. The gentleman promptly told him he was being inappropriate, loud, and needed to F off. To my surprise, Loudmouth stepped aside and with one final insult and stomped out of the store. I thanked the gentleman and we continued waiting in line, me with an entire week of groceries and him with a bottle of Gatorade. I offered to let him go in front of me and he declined, saying that he wasn't in a rush. It was really like one of those scenes in a movie where the nice tough guy saves the girl from the jackass. Even so, I was afraid Loudmouth would be waiting outside. So, I asked the cashier to call one of her coworkers to walk me to my car. The gentleman insisted that he would be happy to escort me to my car, and I accepted. But as I stood there watching the cashier ring my items, I was overcome by this sick feeling like I was going to vomit everywhere. I decided it was just my nerves, as I have issues with anxiety, and this reaction is pretty normal. It typically passes within a few minutes once I mentally talk myself down. But for fear of further embarrassment, this time in the form of projectile vomiting in the middle of a grocery store, I hurriedly paid and took a seat on a bench close by. I told the gentleman never mind, and that I was a little freaked out, so I was going to call my husband to come pick me up instead. We'd get the car later. I didn't care. I just wanted to make it home in one piece. He told me to have a nice day and walked out the door. Hand to God. As soon as he walked out of the building, I felt normal again. So, still blaming my anxiety, I feel sort of silly, but I'd already called my husband, so I stood up and pushed my cart over to the window to watch for my ride. Just in time to see a junky white SUV drive by with, freaking wait for it, the gentleman in the passenger seat and Loudmouth in the driver's seat. I about shit my pants. True scary stories. I was homeless in Long Beach, California in 1980 at 16 years old because my mom was in federal prison and my dad lived in Texas. I was staying in cars and garages. I was hitchhiking from downtown to Belmont Shores one day and was given a ride by a dude who was kind of strange, but I wasn't worried. I had already a hard drug user, and I had been arrested for 25 pounds of marijuana in Huntington Beach. That's another story. I was picked up by this dude, and as we drove down Ocean Boulevard, he said to me, "I have to make a short detour and pick up some Valiums." I said okay, and we turned onto Coronado Street and drove a few blocks up the street. He parked in front of a small apartment building and said, "I'll be right back." I was waiting in the car, and he came from the apartment to the car. He said his cousin had locked the Valiums in a safe, and he had paged him and was waiting for him to call with a combo. He asked if I wanted to come up and smoke a joint. I told him okay because I smoke. I followed him upstairs and entered the apartment. I sat down on the couch and immediately scanned the room for weapons because he was kind of strange. Long Beach is full of kind of strange people. I saw a pair of scissors and some other stuff scattered around the apartment. It was fairly clean and well kept. As I'm looking around, he reaches under the couch for what I thought was a weed tray. He says, "Hey, you ever see one of these?" And as I look at what's in his hand, it's a pair of flex cuffs. And he says, "Try 'em on," and then attacks me. He grabs my wrist and pulls out a can of mace and sprays me in the face. He is able to get the zip tie around my wrists, but I pulled one out as he tightened it. I jumped up as we were fighting and got to the scissors. I grabbed the scissors and he got me in a bear hug from behind. I stabbed him in the face as he was trying to pin my arms. I am fighting for my life and stabbed as hard as I could. His grip moved up and pinned my arms and began choking me from behind. I was not able to breathe and thought I was going to die. So I went limp and acted like I was done. He dropped me to the floor and dragged me to the bathroom by my arm. He opened the bathroom door and turned on the sink water and said, "Wash your face," and he left me standing there. I immediately jumped onto the rim of the bathtub, and he stuck his arm in the door holding a towel. I was going to jump out of the second-story window when I saw his arm sticking through the door. I body blocked the door and he fell back, and I jumped over him and ran towards the front door. I got to the front door, and to my horror, I saw that it was a key lock from the inside. I grabbed the doorknob and it turned and luckily opened. I ran outside and began beating on every upstairs door of the apartment complex. It was like 12 units, so I ran and yelled, "Police, police, call the police." I ran downstairs, and there were two guys tossing a football on the street. They must have tripped out because I was freaking out, and I had a zip tie around my wrist. They asked me what was going on, and I told them what happened. Now, I'm not gay, and I was explaining what happened, and they cut the zip tie off, and the weirdo tried to come out and leave. The guys helping me told the dude, "Cops are on the way, and you ain't going nowhere." I heard the sirens, and 3 police cars came with lights and sirens blazing. The police asked me what happened, and I explained. They went up to his apartment and came down and told me I had to go up, back into the apartment. I did not want to go back up there. He told the police I tried to rob him and stabbed him in the face. He said he was not gay and the police looked around and found some gay stuff, and they had the zip tie that was cut off my wrist. They took me outside and explained because I was a juvenile, my parents would have to come to the station to press charges. They told me that if they arrested him, I would be coming also. I said I refused to press charges because I didn't want my parents involved. They left, and I went on my merry way. My mom got out of the feds, and I moved to Texas for 5 years. I came back, and my mom and sister had bought a house almost directly across the street from the 12-plex. My sister said she wanted to introduce me to her new husband. I almost had a heart attack. It was the dude tossing the football that day, and he said, "Where do I know you from?" I told him, "You remember the kid with the zip tie?" And he said, "No effing way." To this day, I am so grateful for those two guys. Now, I can luckily call one of them my brother-in-law. Paranormal. This morning, I woke up at my usual time, 5 a.m., to go to the gym before classes. I'm off campus staying with my parents, however. They are away for a month, so I've had the house to myself. Well, anyways, every morning I wake up, let my dog out to do his business, shower and brush my teeth, and let him back inside before I get dressed and leave. This morning, I woke up feeling a little weird. The house had a strange energy, and my gut sensed that something was up. I let my dog out into our pitch-black backyard. The deck light didn't turn on like it usually does, which is unusual. But I thought nothing of it and went to go shower. After my shower, I went back to the sliding glass door to let my dog in, and I could see him sitting there waiting for me. I opened the door and watched him. He's a large black lab. Walk in and hid under a table. I then proceeded to close the door and walk to my room to get dressed. Here's where it gets weird. As I was leaving the area where the back door is, I felt that same strange feeling that I had been feeling all morning. I decided to look at the dog's bed and noticed he wasn't in it. So I looked back at the door and saw, to my utter confusion, that he was still sitting outside. My stomach instantly dropped. I could have sworn on my life that I watched him come in the house and hide under a table. I walked back to the door, let my actual dog inside, and instantly searched my house to see if another animal came inside instead. I didn't find anything. As I thought more about it, the thing I let in before looked more like a shadow rather than a dog, and it moved differently, although it was around the same size. I called my girlfriend to tell her about it, as she was waiting for me at the gym, and she said it was probably just my imagination. But I have never, ever imagined something this real. I wasn't even tired. I noticed that my dog was acting a little strange too, staring at one of our walls and growling quietly. I left soon after that and got on with my day. I'm at a loss. If anyone has a possible explanation to ease my nerves, because I'm really dreading sleeping there alone tonight, please let me know. creepy encounters. Several years ago, I walked a handful of blocks up the street from my partner's house to a convenience store to buy something to drink. It was about 11 p.m., and I was trying to slide in there before the store closed. To set the scene, we live in a transitory neighborhood that was chock full of abandoned houses and crime, with a few occupied residences and businesses scattered about. There were 0 streetlights or illumination. Envision a more compact version of the type of Detroit neighborhood exemplified in the movie Barbarian, and you won't be far off the mark. Looking back, the nighttime excursions to the store and from my place to his were absolutely idiotic on my part. But after living in that environment for years, you just become accustomed to it. Anyway, it was one of my many foolhardy nighttime store trips. My partner, by then, would ask me not to do it, but I just ignored that. I wanted my drink. So dumb of me. I got the few blocks up the street in the usual darkness, got my drink, and left the store to head back. Outside the store, a guy was standing near the trash can, hassling everyone who came out, asking for money, cigarettes, etc. I told him I didn't have anything and started to cross the parking lot and head back. But this guy sprang after me like a freaking rabbit and grabbed a hold of my arm. He starts aggressively demanding that I go to a party with him and trying to steer me down the pitch-black side street just beside the convenience store. He was probably 6'7", crazy tall and super thin, with dreads all in his face, making it hard to even see what he looked like. His fingers bit into my arm and felt like they pinched a nerve. My heart starts pounding like crazy right away. I was used to brushing off this type of behavior, having lived in that neighborhood for several years by then. But this was way more aggressive than anything I'd faced so far. I shook my arm out of his grasp, told him I was heading to my boyfriend's place, and it was only a few blocks down the street. He was waiting for me, said sorry in an attempt to placate him, and took off speed walking down the street at top speed. He called after me several times, and then I heard his quick footsteps as he decided to follow me down the street. By then, I could feel my heartbeat in my eyeballs. My mouth had gone cotton dry, and I was almost hyperventilating with fear, trying to stay quiet so this asshole wouldn't hear me. I had this feeling that to show fear or to look back at him would cause him to react violently right away. So, I just put on a burst of speed and tried to outwalk him. However, my 5'5" legs were no match for his crazy long stride, and I could hear little pieces of rock and concrete crunching under his feet as he closed in on me. I literally felt like my heart would leap out of my chest or explode from fear. I tried to walk even faster, but I could hear the guy right behind me. I could hear his breath in my ear and got this overwhelming feeling that he was going to grab me at any second, maybe with a weapon, and tried to force me to walk wherever he wanted me to. The neighborhood is pitch black, and there's no real through traffic, not at night. If he wanted to force me to go with him, I'd be powerless. save for trying to run from him. But with his height advantage, I knew he'd catch me first. Then I could finally see my boyfriend's driveway and him standing at the end of it, waiting for me. He had a terrible feeling and already worried constantly about me walking at night. So he'd come outside to wait for me. I saw that he had his crowbar in one hand, his usual defense weapon, kept near the front door. And then my nerve broke and I started sprinting toward him. And the tall dude behind me started to run after me. I reached the place where my boyfriend stood and squeaked out, "Help!" or something like that, dove behind him and cowered, waiting for the tall dude to pull a gun and shoot us both, or start struggling with my boyfriend. It didn't happen. He gets right up in my boyfriend's face, standing way too close to him, and asks for a light. My boyfriend gives him one, holding the crowbar aloft in the other hand so that it was very visible. Then I grab a hold of him and yank him into the house, locking the door and absolutely losing it, sobbing and freaking out while trying to choke out what happened. My boyfriend goes looking from the windows and sees him kind of standing around and then leaving. He saw him here and there for months afterwards, up at the store or walking up and down the street. Unsurprisingly, I'm sure, I never took another nighttime walk. I still sometimes have nightmares about it. Creepy encounters. A while back, I was on vacation with my toddler, and we were at a hotel pool, while my husband was getting things settled in the room before joining us. There was a guy who I saw come upstairs, look at the pool, then walk away a couple times, before he finally came into the pool area and sit down with an e-reader. While he was sitting there, I glanced up frequently to find him looking at my kiddo and I, texting or looking towards the hotel and parking lot like he was waiting for someone. This could have been totally innocent behavior. Kiddo was a cute small human talking up a storm, and he could very well have been waiting for someone. But after a while, it started to freak me out a bit. All I could think is we were at a hotel less than 2 miles from a major airport. And if someone came into the parking lot and grabbed my child, they could be on a flight before anyone could even figure out where they'd gone. I kept my kiddo closer and closer to me until my husband finally joined us. About 5 minutes later, the guy left the pool without ever having met up with anyone. I guess his book could just have been boring, and it was too cold outside. But it still freaks me out to this day because I did not know his true intentions. And that, dear listeners, is the end of this one scary mashup. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. And if you're awake and listening, I hope you have enjoyed this collection. Until next time, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or